This happened a few years ago, and even now I still hesitate before telling it because it ruined Christmas for me in a way I don't think will ever fully go away. My name is Daniel, and at the time I was working overnight security at a large shopping mall in the Midwest. Christmas week is always strange for mall security. During the day, it's packed, loud, and chaotic, but at night it becomes this massive, hollow building full of shadows and echoes. On Christmas Eve, the mall closed early, and by midnight, it was just me and one other guard on opposite ends of the property. Snow was falling hard outside, coating the parking lot and muting every sound. Around 2:15 a.m., I was doing my usual patrol when I heard music faintly echoing through the halls. At first, I thought it was just leftover noise from a store that forgot to shut off a speaker, but as I followed the sound, I realized it was coming from multiple directions. It was Christmas music, but distorted and slowed down, like an old cassette tape being eaten by a player. As I walked past the empty storefronts, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The mannequins inside several clothing stores were no longer facing forward. They were turned toward the hallway, all of them angled as if watching me walk past. I told myself someone from maintenance must have moved them earlier, but that explanation fell apart when I passed a toy store and saw one mannequin pressed right up against the glass, its plastic face inches from mine. The music stopped abruptly. In the silence, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, flashlight raised, but the hallway was empty. My radio crackled to life, and I heard the other guard whisper my name in a shaky voice, asking if I was hearing the music too. Before I could answer, a loud bang echoed from the food court, followed by what sounded like laughter. Not normal laughter, but high-pitched and forced, like someone imitating joy. I ran toward the sound, my boots slipping slightly on the polished floor. When I reached the food court, I saw Christmas decorations scattered everywhere, chairs knocked over, and in the center, a large inflatable Santa slashed open, its fabric flapping slowly. Written on the floor in what looked like ketchup at first, but definitely wasn't, were the words, "Merry Christmas." My radio went dead. The lights flickered, and in that moment of darkness, I felt something brush past my arm. I didn't wait to investigate. I ran straight to the security office and locked myself inside until police arrived. They searched the mall and found nothing. No intruders, no signs of forced entry. But when daylight came, every mannequin was back in its original position, and the cameras showed nothing unusual. I quit that job the next week. To this day, I still can't walk through a mall during the holidays without feeling watched.
The second story happened when I was a teenager, around 16, during a Christmas I was supposed to be spending happily with my family. Instead, it turned into the most terrifying night of my life. My parents owned a small cabin in northern Michigan, and every year we'd drive up there for a few days to enjoy the snow and isolation. That year, a blizzard hit harder than expected, and my parents decided to go into town to get supplies while I stayed behind to watch the house. I remember feeling excited at first. Being alone in the cabin felt grown up and peaceful. I watched TV, drank hot chocolate, and listened to the wind howl outside. Around 8 p.m., the power went out. The TV shut off, and the cabin was plunged into darkness, except for the fireplace. I wasn't worried at first. Power outages were common up there. But then I heard knocking. Slow, deliberate knocks on the front door. I froze. No one was supposed to be anywhere near the cabin, especially in that weather. I didn't answer. The knocking stopped, and for a moment I felt relief. Then I heard footsteps crunching through the snow, circling the cabin. A shadow passed by the window, tall and unnatural in shape. I grabbed my phone, but there was no service. The footsteps stopped behind the cabin, and I heard something scrape against the back door. That's when I noticed muddy handprints appearing on the frosted window beside the door, as if someone was pressing their hands against the glass, trying to see inside. I screamed, and suddenly everything went quiet. Too quiet. Minutes passed, maybe longer, and I didn't move. Finally, headlights appeared outside as my parents' truck returned. When they ran inside, I tried to explain what happened, but there was no one there. No footprints in the snow, no handprints on the glass. But later that night, when the power came back on, my dad checked the back door and found deep scratch marks around the lock, like someone had tried to pry it open with their bare hands. We left the next morning, and we never spent Christmas at that cabin again.
The third story was told to me by my aunt, and it's one of the few stories that made me physically sick while listening. She worked as a nurse in a small hospital in rural Pennsylvania. On Christmas night, the hospital was mostly empty, with only a handful of patients and minimal staff. Around 3 a.m., a man dressed as Santa Claus walked into the emergency room. His suit was dirty and torn, and he smelled strongly of iron and smoke. He told the receptionist he'd been in an accident and needed help. As soon as my aunt saw him, she felt something was wrong. His smile never reached his eyes, and he kept humming Silent Night under his breath. While they were checking him in, another nurse screamed from one of the rooms. A patient who had been asleep was now missing, and the bedsheets were soaked in blood. Panic spread through the hospital. When security tried to locate the man in the Santa suit, he was gone. A trail of bloody footprints led to the back exit and into the snow, where they abruptly stopped. Later that morning, police found the missing patient's body hanging from a tree a mile away, dressed in the Santa suit. The original man was never identified. Every Christmas after that, my aunt refused to work night shifts, saying she could still hear that humming echoing down the hallways in her dreams. The final story is one I experienced more recently, and it still makes my hand shake when I think about it. Last December, I volunteered to deliver food baskets for a local charity on Christmas Eve. I was assigned a rural route, dropping off packages to families who couldn't leave their homes. Most of the deliveries were normal, even heartwarming, but the last address was a small farmhouse far from the main road. Snow was falling heavily, and by the time I arrived, it was almost completely dark. I knocked on the door several times, but no one answered. I was about to leave the basket on the porch when I heard a voice from inside whisper, asking me to come in. That should have been my cue to leave, but against my better judgment, I opened the door. Inside, the house was freezing, with no lights on except for a single Christmas tree glowing in the corner. The ornaments were old and cracked, and the smell of decay hung in the air. I called out, asking if anyone needed help. That's when I noticed the floor was covered in footprints leading in circles around the tree. Slowly, one by one, the lights on the tree went out, until only darkness remained. I felt a presence behind me, close enough to feel warm breath on my neck. A voice whispered, "You're late," and I bolted out the door, slipping on the porch and barely making it to my car. When I looked back, the house was gone, completely gone, just an empty field covered in snow. I reported it to the charity and the police, but no records existed for that address. No house had ever stood there. I stopped volunteering after that. Christmas is supposed to be about warmth and safety, but after everything I've seen and heard, it's hard not to believe that something darker moves more freely during that time, hiding behind lights, music, and forced cheer, waiting for the moment you let your guard down.